Wonderful. It's wonderful. And
Yeah.
despite my name, you might have expected an American accent, but as you can see, I'm British.
What gave you the idea for writing a novel? I know that you've written other stuff, but this is the first novel. How did that come about?
It brought that
Uh,
back, and I just kept looking at the cover and flicking through the pages, and I sat down and read it, which you know, nothing's so scary once you break it down into one step at a time. You know.
oh, such good stuff. Do you dream of adding your very own book to the collection of books that have already been written? Do you wonder where to start or how to finish? Does the idea of writing a book seem too overwhelming? Do you just want to polish up those writing skills or stay motivated? Do you wonder what to write about? Everything you need to help you write, stay motivated, and self-publish your own book is right here on one channel. And why? Well, because it's time to get over the writer's hump and just do it. You can write anything. Yep, you can write a book. Hello and welcome to A Book. Guess what? We have another exciting episode for you today. But before we get started, I want to tell you a little about this channel. Of course, you are here because you know that we get to interview authors from all around the world, authors that I know you are going to fall in love with. So do me a favor, help these authors out. Hit the subscribe and like button and make sure that you are sharing this interview with all of your friends. Today, we have a fantastic author. His name is Clint Green. Clint is a brand new author, and I am so excited that he's here. Clint, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. Great to be here.
Ah, we've waited a long time for you to get to be here, haven't we?
Well, we have, but you wait for the best things in life always.
This is the best. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Clint, I know that you and I got to have a wonderful conversation before we even scheduled you to be on this show. And you told me some very interesting things about yourself. But before I have you speak, I want to just let people know how wonderful I think technology is because we are half a world apart from each other, and yet we still get to have this conversation with the rest of the world. Isn't that fantastic?
Wonderful. It's wonderful. And
Yeah.
despite my name, you might have expected an American accent, but as you can see, I'm British.
I I love it. We Americans love British accents. Did you know that?
I do. When I've been
Yes.
to America, it's been
Ah,
fantastic. I always get picked on if I'm in an audience and they're doing audience work.
oh no, you're kidding. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're not here to talk about that. I want to give you an opportunity to tell our audience about yourself and about your book, and then we're going to have a conversation about that.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, yeah, my name's Clint. I'm comfortably in my 40s somewhere, and I'm a writer, which is
Mm.
nice to be able to say. I've written plays in the past and a graphic novel, but this is my first book, and yeah, it's a fantastic experience, and it's brilliant to be able to share it with people.
Well, let me ask you this. What gave you the idea for writing a novel? I know that you've written other stuff, but this is the first novel. How did that come about?
I've always wanted to write a novel, even before I think I even realized I wanted to. Um, I remember back in school, I read a fantastic book by an American author, Gene George, My Side of the Mountain. I don't know if anyone's ever read it, set in the Catskills. And I've read that book so many times that the spine's fallen off,
Oh,
and I was just transported to this other world. Um, and weirdly enough, that section from that book came up on my English literature exam at school, where you had
no
to write.
kidding.
I know, I know. I think I felt I had an unfair advantage because I knew it back to front. And you had to write a story inspired by it. And I started writing it. And then I got into that flow, that magical flow. I think that all writers will know that doesn't always
Oh,
come. Some days you don't, some days you do. Uh, and crafted this story that I didn't know I had it in me. And that was just, that was just a 500 words in an exam or something. Uh,
Wow.
that started it for me. And creating these other worlds, either in my head or now on paper, and being able to share that is I think why we all do it. But that's what did it for me.
Yeah, yeah. But so that experience kind of reminded me of an experience that I had that, to be honest with you, I had completely forgotten about until you were talking. When I was in about fifth or sixth grade, I must have been sixth grade now that I think a little bit harder. I wrote this little story because it was creative writing and we had to do that. And I don't, maybe it was 3 or 4 pages long, and it got submitted, it got sent off wherever the teacher sent this little story to. And it got entered into a contest. Now I didn't win the contest, but it was good enough that she entered it into the contest. And I remember being so proud of that. So very
Yeah.
proud of that work, that I did that, and it was a good story. It was a real good story. That did not inspire me to become a writer, though. So it's interesting that you had a similar experience where you had to write and it did inspire you. I find that interesting how we can have similar experiences and walk away with two different feelings.
But it's only looking back on it now that I think I realized what that magic was. Uh,
Oh, I
uh,
see.
yeah, it's only looking back on it now, and then I think there was me trying to find a way to tell stories, um, be it in plays or through theatre. I've got a big background in theatre as well, then through graphic novels, and sometimes just talking to friends and doing the what ifs that you do with friends. What if we were in this position? What if we won the lottery? Where would we live? How would life be? Um, and I think the other thing as well is, so I'm an only child, and my father was in the army, so we moved sort of every year or two from Germany to England to all over the place. So I had to keep restarting at different schools all the time. So I did spend a lot of time on my own in fantasy worlds. And I remember the best thing about that was each school would have a different library, and there'd be different books in these libraries. And I'm a voracious reader. I can get through
Uh,
3 or 4 books a week. Um, and I remember that being one of the only saving graces of what was a little bit of a lonely life when I was sort of young and then into my teens. Um, so I think that's what captured and inspired that love of stories and fantasy worlds and your imagination. And then it just grows a bit too
nice.
big sometimes and starts spilling out.
Question for you. Each time you went to a new school, did you reinvent yourself? And I'm asking because I went to 11 schools before I ever graduated high school. So I understand. And sometimes it was nice to get to start over, especially when you're 14, 15 years old and you're awkward anyway.
Yeah, I always intended to, and I never did. I never actually quite managed to do it. I remember always thinking it was going to be different this time. I was going to,
Mm.
you know, be someone slightly different. And it never actually worked for me. The only time that's worked for me in my life is as when I started suffering really, really badly from anxiety. And I
Mm.
remember at some points I would speak to people and I would stammer and I would physically shake. So I invented a new person called Clint Green, which is my full name, but I never use it, whose life was very like mine, but I just changed some details. So instead of living in Germany till I was 4, I lived in Germany till I was 5. This Clinton did. And this Clinton was much more confident than Clint was. Um, and I remember it being a very useful tool then to sort of get through that anxiety and be able to speak to people and be able to go on dates or whatever instead of like cowering in my room. Um, so that's the only time I think I've ever actually really reinvented myself. But because it was still me, but with just a couple of unimportant details changed, I think that was
It
quite a
just
good,
it just provided you with that confidence that you needed.
yeah. And then it just absorbed into myself, and now I can stand up and speak in front of 1,000 people and not not be bothered at all.
Isn't that amazing? That is wonderful. One little thing that you did for your mind could help you with that. That is incredible. So
Yeah.
I know I took some notes on you. We were talking
Oh yeah.
before we started the video. One of the things that you talked about was that you were really heavily into theater, these
Mhm.
plays. Did you, and you wrote some plays, or did I misunderstand?
Yes, yeah. I wrote some plays.
Okay.
So when I was at British College, which is sort of, I guess it's I still don't understand the grade system in America. I'm really sorry, but it's before pre-university, but after school. So I guess it's
Okay.
probably late high school. And I I went to study um, archaeology. I wanted to be an archaeologist, so
Mm.
I went to study geology, history, physics, etc., etc. And then a friend of mine was doing a drama course, and they were like, "Oh, it's a really good course. You should just come there." And on a whim, I changed my mind and went on this course. And it it was transformative. It was so good because in your first year, the tutors directed a play, chose a play, and you were in it. In your second year, um, you picked a play and you directed it. But then in your final year, you had to write a play from scratch, um,
Oh,
create
goodness.
the costumes, everything. And we did. And we ended up playing to sort of 18,000 people over the course of the run. And then we decided to take that with us and we formed our own theatre company where we did some original plays and some other plays. And that lasted for about 8 years after we left.
No
And
kidding. Did you do some acting as well, or did you just do the writing?
I did a little bit of acting as well in those. Um, and I reached the point when I then went on to university and studied creative arts as well. And I realized that, if I had a career in acting, I'd probably be second policeman from the left or older
I
brother.
find that very hard to believe.
I just there's a realism when it comes to that. Certainly back then, it's like um, people of a different body shape would get certain roles. So I'd always be the funny best friend or the policeman or someone in authority or whatever. And I wasn't talented enough to do anything really really clever. That's not putting myself down. It's just I didn't have that skill, but what I did have that skill for, hopefully, is telling stories and writing the plays. Suddenly, that sparked a real passion in me, more so than being on stage. So yeah.
So that's what you did. Okay. And now I want to talk a little bit about your writing process when it came to your first novel. And first off, tell us the title of that and let us know what made you decide to write this.
So um, I never actually thought I'd write a science fiction novel, but it is. I've got lots of stories bubbling away inside myself, but this is the one that felt like it needed to be told first. This is where the characters were much more fully formed in my mind and the storyline, and it's part of a series, and it's the first book, and it's called Stars Odyssey.
Stars
Um,
Odyssey.
yeah.
Okay.
And that's the one that came out first. You can't choose your first child.
No,
You
no, you sure can't.
don't know whether they're going
So-
to be troublesome or well behaved, but this one was quite well behaved.
Oh, I like that. I love that. Okay, so what was the writing process? First, answer this. How long ago was it that you actually started writing this book?
I started writing it in September last year,
So
and
it came out fast.
it came out fast. Yeah, in the end, it did. I'd been thinking about it for years before that. So I'd been daydreaming, thinking, and had scribbled notes here, there, and everywhere. Um, and last year, I had to move back up home with my parents because my father's got a terminal illness. So I've moved home to help him out, and I gave up my job in London, which was fantastic. I was working at the O2 Arena, massive stadium, um, and I had a lovely little flat. And suddenly I found myself back in a tiny little box room in my parents' home, helping my parents out, and you know, finding another job up here to work. And weirdly, having to completely shift my life around like that, I realized what was important. So things like I moved home because of my father, because of my family. And I really enjoyed coming back to an area I spent a lot of time with. It. I wouldn't say it was my home area because I've moved around so much, but this is where I went to college and university, and I've met up with a lot of friends. So I think that really solidified to me what's important in life, and what's not important is fear so much. Um,
Yes, yes.
and so I just said to myself, you talk about writing all the time. You think about these things, and you scribble ideas, then scribble them out and go back again. And so I just thought, screw it, just do it. And I did. I said to myself, I'm not going to go back and revise things as I go. I'm going to sit at the right from the beginning to the end, only correcting minor mistakes, and then trust that the editing process is where I can go back and then try and perfect that and uplift it. That's what it's there for. But I think a
Yes.
lot of writers think the writing process is that. I did for years, and I would write a chapter, then I'd go back and go, no, no, cross out huge bits of it, but get stuck and have no progression. So I literally said, I'm just going to write it, and I did, and words flew out. I set
Wow.
myself a goal of how much to write every day, and I'd often exceed it. Um, but I also didn't beat myself up if I didn't make it. I just made sure I wrote something, a sentence, a word, an idea, and
Let
did
me
it. Yeah.
tell you why I love that. Because this channel is all about letting people know that they can write. That somebody that you don't have to wait to write a book. Anybody can write a book. And there are so many people who think if I can't do it perfectly, I better not do it. The world is going to make fun of me if I don't get it just right. If I'm not the next Harry Potter series or I'm not the next Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
And I really love encouraging people to just do it, just do it. And I always say that first book for most people, there are those exceptions, but for most people, that first book is like the first pancake. Do you have
Yes.
pancakes? Do you guys eat
Yeah.
pancakes?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I know what you
So,
mean.
yeah, and it's just it's getting over that fear. I think truly it boils down to a fear of rejection. We get afraid that people are going to reject our writing, which we can internalize and think that it's personal and they are rejecting us, which isn't the case at all.
Not at all. Not at all. And I think that's key as well. Is it doesn't matter
No.
if that first book doesn't set the world on fire, because there's going to be some people out there that really connect with it. If you only connect with 10, 15 people and it becomes meaningful to them,
Mhm.
that's great. But what have you learned along the way? I've learned so much. There's so many things that even now, if I was in the mindset I was last year, I'd be going back and altering and changing and this, that, and the other. But I said to myself, when I'd finished it, I've got to let it out into the world. And if it doesn't do well, there's a lesson. And what about the next one? What about the next one? Um, and even
Ah,
if you do publish, if you write something, if you've written a book, even if you put it on a shelf and don't do anything with it for a while, that's a huge achievement.
absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Huge.
My first book was horrible. It was terrible. It was garbage. And but I learned there was so much to learn about the publishing process, the writing process. I didn't know how to get an editor. I didn't know any of these things. And but what I did know is that I could do it.
Yeah.
That's what it told me is that it could be done. I
Yeah.
thought I had to wait for permission and that everything had to be perfect and it wasn't, and I didn't. And here came this book that I got to hold in my hand
Yeah.
and say, I did that. And even though it wasn't the best book, it was garbage, but it encouraged me to write more, to write another
Yeah.
one. I'm now on my eighth and ninth book that I'm writing simultaneously because of that. And I believe that it's just getting over that idea that I'm not good enough to do this or nobody's going to care about it. That just, if you've ever thought, I want to say this to the audience very clearly, if you have ever thought about writing a book, just do it because anybody can write a book, even you. Am I right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, throw the rules out the window as well. It's that
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a book, it could be a novella. It could be a selection of short stories. It could be fan fiction on a web. Whatever you want to share,
Or a
you
blog post or poetry.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
Yes.
I do think that fear of rejection, and you're so right when you say that, they're not rejecting you. It's that my mum read 10 pages of my book and said, I can't read it, it's nonsense. Because it's science fiction. It's not her
Yes.
thing. She doesn't get it. She doesn't like it. And my friend was like, she said that to you. I was like, yeah, and it's fine because that is so not her thing. It's fine. If I wrote about a Yorkshire farmer delivering calves in a field, she would love it. You
Because
know,
that's the genre she would prefer to read in.
that's exactly it.
Yes.
And I don't mind. I this is a very specific genre that many people don't enjoy, and
Mhm.
that doesn't say anything about me or my writing.
Yes. Yeah.
When people comment how many times I use the word but, that's about me and my writing, and that's a lesson, you know. But
Right.
also those harsh lessons or bad reviews, you you can use those, you can take those away, even if you don't agree with it. It's worth trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes and their perspective. And it's the thing I actually teach a lot at work. So I work at a visitor attraction, and I manage the staff there. Fantastic old castle and art galleries is
Ah,
brilliant.
how fun.
And what I say to the team about, I teach empathy, and I say empathy, empathizing with someone doesn't mean agreeing with somebody, and that's
Hmm.
something people don't get a lot. Even if that person's opinion is completely wrong in your point of view, you don't know what's happened to that person that day, what their life's been like, how they were brought up, whether they spilled coffee on themselves in the morning, had a minor car crash, couldn't get parked, dropped their shopping. You know, that moment of that person, whether it's a review or an interaction, it's just a glimpse in their life, and you do not know what's happened. So
Oh,
you can
so,
empathize with them, going, "Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way," or "Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say." You don't have to take it to heart. That's one of
yeah.
those key things. So
Yeah.
important.
Oh, I love that. It's so beautiful and it's such a wonderful message for everybody. And it doesn't matter whether it has to do with writing or whatever it is that you are passionate about. When somebody else doesn't agree with that passion, it has nothing to do with you. It's about them. It is always about them. So, oh, I just love that. One thing that I would like to say, and this is just there are people who really want to write, but they don't know some of the logistics. Like, how do I go about getting my book on Amazon? Where do I find an editor? These were all struggles that I faced as a brand new writer. I didn't know any of this. I knew nothing. I went to YouTube University to learn all of that.
Yes.
And it was hours and hours and hours of scouring information to learn all of this. And it was very daunting. And some of that it took away from the writing process itself. So there is a solution to that part of it. And that is a wonderful company out there called Victory Vision Publishing. And they help people get over that hump. They help people. They're not going to give you your writing idea, but they're going to help you with things like, where do I go to get it published? They do a lot of coaching to help you, just a lot of things that they can do. So if you don't mind, Clint, we're going to take about a minute here and we're going to go hear something about Victory Vision Publishing, and we'll be right back. Hey everyone, are you stuck trying to figure out how to finish writing or publishing your book? Well, let me tell you about Victory Vision Publishing. Victory Vision Publishing is there to help you cross that finish line. They have package plans that are tailor-made just for your individual needs. They have learning opportunities where you can discover ways of overcoming some obstacles that you might have. Adam Fleming is a wonderful CEO, and they are a fully staffed team just waiting to help you edit, lay out, maybe make a cover for your book. Go ahead and join their email list and check out some of the wonderful books and wonderful authors that they have already helped get published. Yep, Victory Vision is definitely the way to go if you feel stuck and just want some support in getting your book out to the world. You're only one book away from changing the world. victoryvision.org. Okay, we are back and we have been talking to Clint Green. And Clint, we were discussing, not being held back because of fear and not taking some of those rejections to heart. But one thing I do want to do is I'd like to give the world an opportunity to actually see your book. This is your very first book and you have so much to be proud of. So we're going to go ahead and pull that up for just a minute here. This is Star's Odyssey. This is Clint's very first novel, and this is a science fiction novel, correct? Am I right
It is,
there?
yes.
Yeah. And so tell us just a little bit about this. Before we get started, did you make your own cover or did you have a designer do that for you?
So the cover is actually made by the lead designer on Doctor Who, on all of their
Oh, no
book
kidding. Oh,
merchandise. Yeah, who's an old friend of mine, um, who did it for me. I paid him, of course, um,
that's
but he's
wonderful.
a fantastic designer, and it's Two Lady Designs. If you want to have a look at that on Facebook, absolutely wonderful. But yeah,
So tell us about the story very quickly.
so it's science fiction, but it's soft science fiction. Anyone can read it. I think fans of fantasy will enjoy it. It's got a lot of humor. It's about a group of disparate people who are in a horrible situation. They've been taken from their home planets, tortured, kidnapped, and then set free and find family between themselves. So it's this journey through space on a living starship who's also been a victim of this, and how they all come together and find common ground and find a family, the weirdest family that could be, but
Oh
they
my
find a
goodness.
family.
Oh my goodness. And you're not going to spoil it and tell us about the family.
No spoilers, it's book
No
one of a
spoilers.
series.
I want to share it again one more time. Star's Odyssey by Clint Green. You'll definitely want to go over to Amazon and find this book. And I'm assuming, Clint, that you poured so much of yourself and your own unique personality into the story that I'm kind of excited about it. So yes, make sure you do that. We will be leaving a link in the description of this video, so you won't have any problem finding that. But again, that is Star's Odyssey by Clint Green. I'm going to go ahead and pull that off of here for just a second. Clint, that's amazing. Let me ask you something. What were three things that you learned through this process about yourself? Because I think you have so much to say.
You can't shut me up normally.
Oh, I
Yeah.
don't mean like that. I think you have important things that the world needs to hear about.
So I learned not to let fear hold me back, and that's definitely something I try and apply in life. It's absolutely okay to make mistakes.
Yes.
Um, it's absolutely okay. It's the only way you learn, really learn, and internalize those lessons is making a
Make
mistake
mistakes,
yourself.
learn from them, of course.
Absolutely, and I've made loads of mistakes in the first book, or choices that I wouldn't necessarily make going further forward. But I'm not going to go back and change those either, because they're
Mm,
a part of that journey and a part of that
yes.
story.
I
So
love that. I love that.
um, so that I've learned how to manage my time better, for sure. When you're working a full-time job and caring for family members and writing, um, there's a real importance in creating a time and a space for yourself, a comfortable
Yes.
time and a space, which I think a lot of people are afraid to do because they somehow feel that's selfish. But it doesn't matter what you do in your life, even if you set aside half an hour, be it early morning, late night, over your lunch break, once you've shoved a sandwich in your mouth, that last 20 minutes to do it. um, Create that space and that time for yourself, because it's really key. And I certainly think in modern life in the UK and in America, we're busy people all the
Busy.
time. Work is so important, home life is so important, this, that, and the other is important. But
Mm.
it's never a bad thing to take some time for yourself, um, be that for self-care
Yeah,
or a
I
project.
always say that you can't pour from an empty cup.
No.
And so if you are pouring into other people and other activities, at some point that will catch up with you. And it
Yeah,
is important to refill your own cup so you have something to give out to the world.
yeah.
That self-care is a big deal.
It's a huge deal. And luckily for me, writing is a form of self-care because it's another way of escape, which is wonderful. And then what else have I learned about myself? Um, Not necessarily about myself, but I learned that writing a book is one thing, but getting it ready for publishing and steady out there is another thing. Like you touched upon earlier, my goodness, it's like having three other jobs on top of writing.
It really is, but don't you think, and I think this, but don't you think that you are more skilled now as a result of having to learn all of those things? I mean, even
Yeah,
some of those skills actually translate into the job market with technology and everything. Because I had so many people say to me, how did you get your book published? How do you do that? And I was able to say, well, let me show you how, because now I had a skill set that I did not have before.
yeah. But like you said, the YouTube University,
Oh,
going out there and the forums that's out there and the advice, be it on something like
it's
Reddit or
amazing.
YouTube or whatever, um, they're fantastic. They really are. Once you cut through the arguments on what this is best, no, this is best, find your own way.
Yeah.
Um, you are right. The skill. I've never thought I'd be developing marketing skills and analytic skills and page bleed, this, that, and the other. And
I didn't know what a page bleed was until I started this.
I know. Now I'm all like, oh yeah, this is the format I've done it
I'm a
in.
pro now.
Yeah, yeah. So that that's a more technical lesson, but I've learned that I can do it. Just by applying, just by sitting and practicing and setting a deadline for myself as well. So once I'd finished the book, I set a publishing date, and it was a couple of months time, but that was my time to review, redraft, etc. I wish I had the money to pay for a professional editor. I couldn't. I had a lovely group of beta readers that helped me through that process, and hopefully next time I will be able to get a professional editor on board. Um, but yeah, setting myself that deadline because I knew that once I'd finished it, if I didn't set that publishing deadline and like announce a release date, there was the possibility I might revert and slip back to like keeping it to myself. But I didn't. I was like, no, I've done it. I'm going to set a date and I'm going to publish it. And you can do that on Amazon. You can upload your manuscript. You can set when you're going to publish it.
Yes.
Months, years down the line, you can change it if the worst comes to the worst, and you can go back and re-upload the manuscript as many times as you want with as many changes as you want. And that was really helpful because that made it tangible.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Then there does come a point where you have to just do it. You have to just let it go and get it done, right?
You really do. You really do. And the the worst thing that can come from that is nothing.
What was
You know,
it like when that book came and you got to hold that book and you saw that it was done, it was published, or you saw it on Kindle? For me, that was really exciting just to see it on Kindle.
that
And this may
so
sound funny. I'm not a Kindle reader. I don't care to read ebooks or anything like that. I like to have the physical book, but this is odd that when I saw that on Kindle, that made it even more real to me than the
yeah.
physical book. And I don't know why. That's just me. But what was it like for you?
I know you meant so I do read a lot on Kindle, but the Kindle books I read are my comfort books. They're the books I will plow through a couple a week. I usually have three books on the go, so I usually have
Oh
like
my.
a light reading book, a, a good book, and then something non-fiction, usually a history book or something. So yeah, when I got that first copy delivered to me, um, it felt almost unreal. It felt almost unreal. But I tell you what was funny was one of the other things before I started writing this process was I had a dream that I was clearing out. I think it must have been partly because of moving and all that type of thing. That I was moving some boxes, and I opened the box, and there were 5 copies of a book that I'd written in this dream, bound and sort of like the physical copies. And I can't even remember what they were about. They weren't this book at all.
Oh
That I think
my.
I think in the dream they were the Red Wall series that I'd written,
Yeah.
which I wish I had, but yeah. And that feeling from that dream was one of the things that spurred me to actually sit down and write. And then when I actually got the book in my hand again, it brought that
Uh,
back. And I just kept looking at the cover and flicking through the pages, and I sat down and read it, which I'd read it so many times
and
during
it's
the
so different than when you read it on the computer screen during the editing process, or even for me, I always do a final read through, but then to get the book and read it on paper,
yeah,
such a
yeah,
different feeling.
totally different. There's nothing like having a book in your hands.
No.
There's nothing like it at all. Um, and I've had to get rid of so many books over the years when I've moved house, because otherwise, you know, so heavy when you're carrying them in moving
It
vans,
is,
and
yes.
let go a lot of my books in time. But there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it at all.
Yeah, yeah. What a wonderful feeling.
Yeah,
If you
it
could
really.
leave our audience with just one thing about yourself and your book and our discussion today, what would that be?
Um. So the characters in my book are put in a situation completely out of their control, and one of the characters who's an alien talks about this situation and essentially uses a proverb from his world, which don't eat the bakatula fruit in one bite; it's too big. Um, and that's the same with writing a book. This big thing, publishing a book, is huge, huge thing. It's scary. It's massive. But if you break it down into little steps, it's not. And it's one of the things I do in life. So put pen to paper, write a
Oh,
title, write a character's name, a synopsis. Once you've got that, just get a piece of paper and rough outline what you're going to do. Break it down. Say, okay, this could be 20 chapters. What needs to happen in chapter one? Hmm, okay, I'm just writing one chapter, 3,000 words, but don't worry about that 3,000. What's your first 500 going to look like? That's
oh,
not big. 500
yeah,
words is not a big thing, is it? We can all
yes,
do that.
yeah.
And then it's just doing
It
that little thing every day.
it's remarkable. It reminds me of this saying that I used to hear: "How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time."
Yeah,
One
that's
bite at a
exactly.
time. You don't eat the whole elephant all at once. So
Yeah.
yes, oh, so
And it's another thing
wonderful.
I use to help get over my anxiety. It's exactly that method. And
Mm,
that's one of the things that echoes in that character in the book from me
oh,
is nothing's so scary once you break it down into one step at a time,
mm.
you
Oh,
know.
well, such good stuff. Clint, I could sit and have a conversation with you forever and ever. I think we have a lot of similarities.
I think
I
so.
do want to show your book one more time. I'm
Mhm.
going to pull that up just one more time for everybody to see. You don't want to miss getting this. This is Clint Green's Stars Odyssey, and you can find that on Amazon. Of course, we will leave the link in the description for you, but please go on over there and yeah, help this writer out. That's what we have to do. We have to support one another. And there are so many readers out there who truly, truly are looking for a good book to read. And I know that they'll find that when they go get yours. So Clint, it has been such a pleasure having you. I could sit and talk with you for hours and hours. I really could. I,
My pleasure too,
ah,
Laura.
we could just,
Absolutely.
I just imagine the conversations we could have about writing and sharing our stories with one another. But
Completely.
unfortunately, we are out of time. And so
Oh,
we are going to get going. But I appreciate you so much. I thank you for being here. And to our
thank you for the
audience,
time.
thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, have a great day and God bless.